Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. In the world of Harry Potter, there are characters whose roles may seem secondary, but who actually bring tension and depth to the story. One of these figures is Lucius Malfoy. He is not merely an arrogant, pure-blood wizard, he is the embodiment of fear, pride, and manipulation. Jason Isaacs portrayed him brilliantly on screen, but as with many film adaptations, much was left behind the scenes. Today, we'll compare Lucius Malfoy from the books with the version we see in the films. More importantly, we'll analyze his actions, motivations, and his true nature, a side that the movies only briefly touched upon. Enjoy watching. Number 1, he cursed Sturgis Podmore and Broderick Bode. At first glance, the scene in Order of the Phoenix where Lucius speaks with Fudge appears routine, but in the book, this seemingly minor interaction hides a dark conspiracy. Lucius wasn't just chatting with the Minister of Magic, he was manipulating him, placing loyal agents in the ministry and eliminating those who stood in his way. Sturgis Podmore, a member of the Order of the Phoenix, fell under the Imperious Curse cast by none other than Lucius. Podmore infiltrated the Department of Mysteries, acting under someone else's will. Broderick Bode, also placed under Imperious, later ended up at St. Mungo's and died under suspicious circumstances after being given a cursed plant. This isn't the work of a side villain. This is a strategist who wields magic as a weapon of influence. Number 2, he claimed he had been tricked into serving Voldemort. As a man whose name was known in every wizarding household, Lucius was the face of old pure-blood aristocracy. His cold manners, icy gaze, and disdain for Muggleborns made him the perfect Death Eater. But after Voldemort's fall, Lucius suddenly played the victim. Arthur Weasley mentions that Lucius claimed to have acted under the Imperious Curse, a spell that robs its target of free will. According to him, he had never willingly served the Dark Lord. Strangely enough, the Ministry accepted this explanation. Or perhaps Lucius simply bought his freedom, as the wealthy so often do in any world. Number 3, he wanted Draco to attend Durmstrang. Lucius wanted his son to grow up in an environment where disdain for Muggleborns was the norm and discipline was law. That's why he nearly sent Draco to Durmstrang, a grim school known for tolerating the dark arts. In Goblet of Fire, Draco casually mentions that his father believed Durmstrang was the best place to raise real wizards. But Narcissa, going against her husband's will, insisted Draco stay at Hogwarts near his family. This was one of the rare moments when Lucius gave in. And that detail matters. Behind his mask isn't an all-powerful tyrant, but a man who knows when to back down. Number 4, he shamed Draco over Hermione. In Chamber of Secrets, Lucius scolds his son for getting lower marks than Muggle-born Hermione Granger. For a proud pure-blood, it was a humiliation. He tells Draco it's disgraceful to be outperformed by a girl who lived among Muggles. This scene reveals the atmosphere inside the Malfoy family. A child must be the best, especially when it comes to competing with those the father considers mudbloods. The irony, of course, is that Hermione, the one they scorn, consistently outshines Draco in academics, bravery, and compassion. Number 5, he supported Dolores Umbridge. When the Ministry appointed Dolores Umbridge as the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor, most parents were horrified, but not Lucius Malfoy. He was one of her most enthusiastic supporters. In an interview with the Daily Prophet, he praised her reforms, saying that Umbridge was exactly what Hogwarts needed. This detail is absent from the films, but in the books it's clear Lucius didn't just support Cornelius Fudge's policies, he helped shape them. He didn't see Umbridge as a teacher, but as a tool to control the school his son attended. Number 6, he warned Draco not to cross the line. In the Chamber of Secrets film, Lucius appears indifferent to Draco's complaints about Harry Potter, but in the book his reaction is more subtle. He advises Draco to be careful, not out of concern for Harry, but because he knows who Harry is. Lucius believes it's unwise to cross the chosen one, Potter isn't just a boy. He survived Voldemort's attack as a baby, defeated him once, and now draws the attention of the entire magical world. Lucius doesn't want his son entangled in a dangerous feud, especially with someone many regard as a hero. Number 7, he believed Voldemort was gone. In Goblet of Fire, when Harry declares that Voldemort has returned, Lucius publicly denies it. He says he never lost faith in the Dark Lord and would have helped if only he'd known. In the film, this comes off as a cold and calculated lie, but in the book there's a crucial difference. Lucius genuinely believed Voldemort was dead. He had rebuilt his life under the new regime, enjoyed his privileges, and pursued political power. His loyalty was a thing of the past. When the Dark Lord returned, he came for his faithful, and Lucius was among the first to be branded a traitor. Number 8. Publicly mocked Arthur Weasley. Lucius Malfoy never missed a chance to humiliate Arthur Weasley. In Chamber of Secrets, their clash at Flourish and Blots was more than a disagreement. It was a boiling point. Lucius scanned the second-hand books in Ginny's cauldron and sneered, "Clearly, fame isn't everything." He mocked Arthur's lowly job at the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts office and his obsession with Muggles. It wasn't just about politics, it was personal. Lucius despised Arthur for marrying a pure-blood name to poverty and principle, and he made sure the entire shop saw it. Then the words turned into fists. In the middle of the store, robes flying, books scattering, Lucius and Arthur brawled like schoolboys. It wasn't polished, it wasn't dignified, it was raw and messy, a pure-blood aristocrat and a working-class father throwing punches in front of their children. The film gives us only a tense exchange, but the book captures something deeper, the old hatred between two worlds, one clinging to blood, the other fighting for change. And Lucius? He hated losing ground. So he fought back with words, and when those failed, with fury. Number 9, wanted Dumbledore removed at any cost. Lucius Malfoy didn't just dislike Albus Dumbledore, he wanted him gone, not out of policy, out of fear. Dumbledore saw through him, through the donations, the politeness, the lies. In Chamber of Secrets, Lucius uses the crisis of the petrified students to strike. He pressures the school governors to suspend Dumbledore. He doesn't argue, he threatens. One governor later confesses to Dumbledore, "He said my family would be next if I didn't agree." That's not politics, that's blackmail. The films show Lucius standing calmly beside Cornelius Fudge, a concerned citizen. But in the book, he's a manipulator working from the shadows. He uses his wealth and fear to bend people. Dumbledore's removal wasn't just convenient, it was his mission. With the headmaster gone, Lucius could push forward darker plans, like slipping a cursed diary into a child's cauldron. He didn't just want influence at Hogwarts, he wanted control. And he was willing to destroy reputations and lives to get it. Number 10. Lost influence after the Department of Mysteries battle. The fall came fast. After the disastrous battle in the Department of Mysteries, Lucius Malfoy was no longer the whispering puppeteer behind ministry curtains. He was a prisoner. In the book Order of the Phoenix, his name is listed among the captured Death Eaters exposed in front of the entire wizarding world. Gone were the elegant robes, the political connections, the smirk of superiority. In Azkaban, Lucius had no influence, no power, just walls and dementors. Voldemort, furious at the loss of the prophecy, made no effort to rescue him. His silence was punishment enough. Rowling never describes Voldemort shouting at Lucius. He doesn't need to. By the time Half-Blood Prince begins, Lucius is absent, and that absence speaks volumes. Narcissa visits Snape alone. Draco is given an impossible task to atone for his father's failure. It's clear Lucius lost everything: trust, rank, relevance. The man who once bullied ministry officials was now a liability. In the films, he's simply caught and removed. In the book, his fall is tragic and complete. Not just arrested, erased. Number 11 tried to intimidate Harry at Hogwarts. Lucius Malfoy didn't take failure lightly. When the Chamber of Secrets was closed and Dobby freed, he stormed into Hogwarts in a barely concealed rage. In the film, he hisses a threat at Harry and turns to leave. But in the book, Chamber of Secrets, the moment is sharper, more dangerous. Lucius pulls his wand. He starts to cast a curse, something fast, dark, and meant to hurt. He doesn't care that it's a school or that Harry is only 12. Pride wounded, status lost, he lashes out. And for the first time, Dobby fights back. With a snap of his fingers, he sends his master flying. J.K. Rowling writes, he raised his hand. A wand was flying out of his cane. But Dobby was faster. That single moment says everything. Lucius didn't just threaten Harry, he meant to attack him. It wasn't calculated, it was raw, emotional violence. A powerful man used to control, now slipping, losing everything. And he turned to the one thing he knew best: force. The film softened the blow. The book showed what Lucius truly was when his plans failed. Not a gentleman, but a man willing to curse a child in a school hallway. Number 12 hid dark artifacts before the ministry raid. Lucius Malfoy never relied on brute force. He used precision, strategy, timing. When rumors spread that the ministry was planning to raid the homes of suspected Death Eaters, Lucius didn't panic. He acted quietly, swiftly. In Chamber of Secrets, we learn he had once possessed a powerful, cursed artifact, Tom Riddle's diary. A fragment of Voldemort's soul lived inside it. And Lucius knew exactly how dangerous it was, not just because of its magic, but because it could tie him directly to the Dark Lord's agenda. So he made a move that was both ruthless and cunning. In the crowded shop of Flourish and Blots, Lucius slipped the diary into the school supplies of Ginny Weasley, the youngest child of the man he hated most. He didn't care about the consequences for the girl. He cared about destroying Arthur Weasley's reputation, sabotaging Dumbledore's authority, and getting rid of an object the Aurors might discover. "You'll find that hard to prove," he tells Harry later when confronted. His smirk says it all. The diary was a weapon, a trap, and a cover-up, all in one stroke. The films reduce this event to a brief moment of cruelty. But in the book, it reveals something deeper. Lucius wasn't just a servant of Voldemort, he was his own operator, cold, tactical, able to commit dark deeds not for devotion, but for power and preservation. He didn't know the diary was a Horcrux, but he knew it was dark. And still he planted it on a child. Not out of madness, out of calculation. That's the Lucius the films never showed. Number 13. Lost his arrogance after Voldemort's return. Teen Torm. Lucius Malfoy had always moved through the wizarding world with effortless superiority. His voice was silk, his gaze icy, and his name enough to silence a room. But after Voldemort's return in Goblet of Fire, that image begins to crack. In the book, when Voldemort calls his followers back, Lucius appears at the graveyard, not proud, not triumphant, but trembling. He bows low, he stammers, and when Voldemort hisses, "Do I detect a hint of regret, Lucius?" The fear in Malfoy's silence is deafening. This is not the man we saw in the ministry corridors. This is someone who knows he is trapped. Back in Malfoy Manor, the change becomes impossible to ignore. Lucius no longer commands. He flinches. He watches. When Harry is captured and brought to the drawing room in Deathly Hallows, Lucius leans forward, desperate, saying, "Draco, look closely. Is it him?" His voice is dry, his hands shaking. He's hoping, not to please the Dark Lord, but to earn his favor back. Lucius is no longer a predator. He's prey. And Voldemort enjoys the hunt. Rowling paints a portrait of a man unraveling. Each word, each glance is a performance of survival. This fear bleeds into his family. Narcissa sees it. Draco sees it. The once glorious name of Malfoy now echoes through a house filled with silence and dread. Voldemort has taken over their home, using it like a stage, while Lucius fades into the background. The man who once sneered at blood traitors now barely speaks. The man who once manipulated the ministry now obeys like a servant. His pride is not wounded. It's gone. In the book, he doesn't even protest when Voldemort takes his wand. He hands it over like a prisoner offering his last defense. The films show Lucius with slicked-back hair and a furrowed brow. But the books show something far more powerful, a man broken without visible chains. A man who once believed he was untouchable, and now flinches at every word from the lips of the Dark Lord. Voldemort didn't kill Lucius, he humiliated him, and that hurt more than death ever could. Number 14 despised Fenrir Greyback. When Fenrir Greyback stepped into Malfoy Manor, even the shadows seemed to recoil. He was no ordinary ally. He was a monster in human form, a savage who delighted in biting children. Lucius Malfoy, once a proud and poised aristocrat, flinched inwardly at the sight of him. Greyback wasn't just a werewolf. He was a disgrace to everything Lucius believed made a proper wizard: lineage, elegance, control. Now this creature sat at their table, grinning with blood-stained teeth, treated as Voldemort's favoured weapon. Lucius didn't dare speak against him, but his disgust was clear. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, Narcissa asks Bellatrix, "You're not seriously thinking of bringing Greyback?" And Lucius stays silent, his face cold. He didn't need words. His silence screamed. Later, when Greyback openly taunts them during the scene at Malfoy Manor in the Deathly Hallows, Draco shrinks away and Lucius stiffens. J.K. Rowling writes, Lucius was white-faced and still, not from fear, from revulsion. Greyback's presence was an insult to his pure blood ideals. This wasn't just prejudice, it was fear of contamination. Lucius had built his life on a hierarchy where bloodlines ruled. Now Voldemort broke that system, placing beasts and half-bloods above men like Malfoy. Fenrir's presence symbolized that shift. The old order Lucius loved was crumbling. He was forced to watch as someone he would never allow past his gates was now favored by the man he once called master. Even at his lowest, Lucius couldn't stomach the idea of calling Greyback an equal. His pride wouldn't allow it, and yet he could do nothing. Stripped of power, robbed of respect, Lucius Malfoy sat in silence while Voldemort elevated a monster. And that silence said everything. Number 15 showed no bravery in the Battle of Hogwarts. Lucius Malfoy's image, forged in silver arrogance and carefully calculated menace throughout the Harry Potter saga, begins to unravel long before the final confrontation at Hogwarts. But while the films romanticize his final act as a father searching for his son in a crumbling castle, the book peels away the mask with cruel precision. On the page, Lucius is no longer a man in command, but a ghost of himself, fragile, desperate, and pitifully broken. His fall from grace is not quiet or noble, it is humiliating, and worst of all, cowardly. The Battle of Hogwarts does not forge a hero in Lucius, but reveals the absence of one. When Voldemort returns at the end of Goblet of Fire, Lucius is among the first Death Eaters to answer the call. Standing with pride and confidence, he represents the old aristocracy of the Dark Lord's supporters, cloaked in wealth and bloodline. He has the ear of power, a wife from a sacred lineage, and a son raised in entitlement. His status is untouchable. But by the time the final book unfolds, this illusion has shattered. Voldemort has taken residence in Malfoy Manor, and Lucius is no longer a guest in his own home. He is reduced to a frightened host, clinging to the crumbling walls of dignity while his master walks freely through his corridors, using his home as a prison and his wand as a leash. This slow erosion of Lucius's identity reaches its apex during the Battle of Hogwarts. The man who once wore dark robes like armor and looked down on blood traitors with disdain is now described as gaunt and grey and slumped in the chair like a marionette whose strings were broken. The words come during a scene in Deathly Hallows, and they are devastating. This isn't just fear, it is spiritual collapse. Lucius has not merely lost favour with Voldemort, he has lost himself. He no longer gives orders, he takes them. And when given the choice between redemption and cowardice, he does not even hesitate. In the film adaptation, Deathly Hallows Part 2, the moment of his departure is crafted with somber affection. Lucius, catching sight of Draco across the battlefield, walks into the chaos to retrieve his son. Narcissa follows, and together they disappear into the smoke, choosing family over war. It's an almost redemptive act, as if the Malfoys, once so entwined with darkness, have chosen love instead. The music swells and no words are spoken. The visual language is clear. Here is a man reclaiming his soul. But the book tells another story, one far less generous. In Rowling's narrative, Lucius does not rise to any occasion. As Voldemort retreats to the Forbidden Forest, demanding Harry's corpse be brought to him, Lucius is already broken. He is not helping the wounded or standing watch. He is not even searching for Draco with determination. He is white-faced and twitching. And when Voldemort demands that someone find Draco, Lucius is not the first to volunteer. He is merely told to go. "Find him!" Voldemort says, and Lucius obeys. Not with courage, but with the fearful compliance of a man used to punishment. This lack of agency is central. Lucius no longer moves with purpose. His son's life is not his only concern. His own survival eclipses everything. The war has ceased to be ideological for him. The grandeur of pure blood supremacy is forgotten. All that remains is the instinct of a cornered animal. He does not even attempt to disguise his panic. While other characters fight and die for what they believe, Remus, Tonks, Fred, Colin Creevey, Lucius does not lift his wand. He does not take a stand. He simply waits, hoping the storm will pass, and that he will still be standing when it ends. The transformation is painful to witness because it is so complete. In Chamber of Secrets, Lucius is a political manipulator, slipping Tom Riddle's diary into Ginny Weasley's cauldron with casual malice. He knows how to pull strings, how to threaten with a smile. But now even his threats are gone. When the final confrontation comes and Voldemort is defeated, Lucius is not among those captured or punished. He is not even noticed. He slinks away, unnoticed, unimportant. The very world he once tried to control has moved on without him. This is not to say Lucius deserved a redemptive arc, only that the film gives him one that the book refuses. In the cinematic version, there is a semblance of choice. He leaves Voldemort not because he has failed him, but because he chooses love over allegiance. The act becomes almost noble in its quiet tragedy. But in the book, his departure is soaked in humiliation. He does not make a choice. He follows orders. And when the battle rages around him, he does not act. He cowers. Lucius looked wildly around, Rowling writes, a hand still clamped upon his son's shoulder, and he made no move to escape the encroaching battle. Compare him to Narcissa, who lies to Voldemort to protect her son. Her act is small in scale but massive in moral weight. She risks death to save Draco, asking Harry in the forest, "Is Draco alive?" before lying to the Dark Lord. Lucius does no such thing. His version of love is passive, inert. He does not lie, he does not fight, and he certainly does not sacrifice. His concern for Draco is never separated from his concern for himself, and in that final image, when the battle is done and Harry has triumphed, the Malfoys are huddled together in a corner, none of them speaking, looking blank and shocked. It is not a family saved by love, it is a family destroyed by fear. Lucius's absence from the battlefield stands in stark contrast to characters who had every reason to flee but stayed. Percy Weasley returns to fight beside his family. Even cowardly characters like Professor Slughorn eventually join the fray. But Lucius, whose pride once demanded he stand above the rest, cannot even muster the dignity to act. He does not confront his mistakes. He does not attempt atonement. He simply disappears, swallowed by his own shame. And that, in the end, is the most damning judgment. Number 16, manipulated the Hogwarts Board of Governors. In the shadowy corridors of power within the wizarding world, few figures wielded influence with the same precision and menace as Lucius Malfoy. While the films presented him as a stylish, snarling aristocrat loyal to Voldemort, the books revealed a much more calculating and dangerous man, one who didn't need wands or curses to destroy his enemies. His most effective weapons were influence, bureaucracy, and fear. In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, J.K. Rowling unveils a particularly chilling example of Lucius' political cunning, his manipulation of the Hogwarts Board of Governors. This dimension of Lucius is entirely absent from the films, where the inner workings of Hogwarts governance are largely ignored, erasing the image of Lucius as a man who could dismantle institutions with a whisper rather than a duel. When the Chamber of Secrets is opened and a series of attacks leaves students petrified, Hogwarts becomes a place of dread and suspicion. But while students and professors search for magical answers, Lucius Malfoy sees opportunity. He doesn't waste time with mere rhetoric. He uses his seat on the Hogwarts Board of Governors, an administrative body that the movies never even mention, to undermine Albus Dumbledore himself. In the book, it is Lucius who visits the school, flanked by the other 11 governors, and presents Dumbledore with a signed order of suspension. It's not just a coup, it's a public spectacle. The scene is filled with the dread of authoritarian maneuvering, wrapped in the elegant speech of an aristocrat who knows exactly how to corrupt a system from within. Lucius doesn't even try to hide the mechanics of his influence. He threatens the other governors, making it clear that opposition would come at a high price. As Dumbledore later explains, "You will find that I will only truly have left the school when none here are loyal to me. You will also find that help will always be given at Hogwarts to those who ask for it." This remark, subtle yet potent, hints that Dumbledore is fully aware of the kind of coercion Lucius used, but Lucius is not ashamed. He's a man who treats fear as a tool, not a failing. The Board of Governors becomes an arena for him to exercise control, not through spellwork, but through whispered threats, blackmail, and social power. The names of these board members are never fully revealed in the book, but we know from J.K. Rowling's additional writings that they were wealthy and influential, exactly the kind of people who would buckle under Lucius's pressure. These were not warriors or visionaries, but bureaucrats and aristocrats. Lucius's presence among them was not accidental. He had bought his way into the heart of educational governance, just as he bought influence at the Ministry of Magic. The fact that he could orchestrate Dumbledore's removal even temporarily should have been a warning to everyone about the dangers of pure blood supremacy wrapped in political charm. This moment of suspension is not just a tactical win, it is Lucius's ideological triumph. Dumbledore, the protector of Muggleborns and half-bloods, the very embodiment of inclusion and progress, is exiled by a pure blood supremacist using bureaucratic channels. It's a metaphor too easily missed in the visual medium of cinema, where such nuances are replaced with wand fights and stern glares. But in the book, the reality is far more sinister. Lucius wins without drawing his wand. He weaponizes Hogwarts itself, turning its governance against its headmaster, just as Voldemort would later try to weaponize its classrooms against its students. Lucius's manipulation of the Board of Governors also serves as a foil to the Ministry's passive incompetence. While Cornelius Fudge dithers and allows public opinion to dictate his decisions, Lucius acts swiftly and ruthlessly. He doesn't wait for confirmation or justice. He crafts a narrative, one in which Dumbledore's presence is the problem, and then imposes that narrative through threats. "The governors feel," he says with fake civility, "that it's time for you to step aside." But it is not the governors who feel, it is Lucius who has ensured they fear. The film adaptation, focused as it is on visual spectacle, omits this entire layer of strategy, painting Lucius only as an angry father rather than a cunning political force. What makes Lucius even more disturbing is that he wraps his manipulations in a veneer of legality. The suspension is technically legal. The governors did sign the order, But the legitimacy is hollow, built on a foundation of threats and coercion. Lucius doesn't break the rules, he bends them until they serve him. This approach, so reminiscent of real-world authoritarian tactics, is what makes him so dangerous. He doesn't storm the castle gates, he walks through the front door, armed with contracts, influence, and carefully veiled threats. It's tyranny disguised as procedure. In this particular moment, we also see how Lucius believes himself untouchable. He's so confident in his ability to control the situation that he even appears at the school in person. His presence is an insult, a calculated affront to Dumbledore, and yet the confidence is not unwarranted. For a time he succeeds. The greatest wizard of the age is pushed out, not by dark magic, but by ink on parchment. It's a victory that reveals Lucius's real talent, not as a duelist or Death Eater, but as a master manipulator of institutions. The absence of this storyline in the film reduces Lucius to a flatter character. We see him threaten and sneer, but we don't see him strategize. We don't see the web he spins around people like the Board of Governors, who bend not because they agree, but because they are afraid. In a world where magic can solve so many problems, Lucius reminds us that fear, power, and influence still work better than any spell. He uses no imperious curse. He doesn't need to. The fear he instills is more effective because it is born of social pressure and political clout. Number 17. Took part in the kidnapping of Ollivander. In the dimming twilight of Diagon Alley, where shutters clattered and the cobblestones echoed with the ghost of busier days, Ollivander's stood silent. Its once luminous windows, clouded with dust, betrayed the eerie emptiness inside. The world around it had shifted. Gone were the excited first years choosing their wands with trembling fingers. Instead, shadows had taken root, and fear soaked the very bricks. In the films, this transformation was left to the viewer's imagination, an empty shop, a vanished wand-maker, and only whispers in the wind. But in the books, the truth was darker, sharper, and unmistakably marked by the cold hands of Lucius Malfoy. Lucius Malfoy, as Rowling crafted him on the page, was never a man of open violence. He moved like a serpent, silent, coiled, striking only when it served his interests. But as the tide of Voldemort's return swelled, Lucius's elegance could no longer shield him. After his catastrophic failure at the Department of Mysteries, where the prophecy was lost and his role as a Death Eater exposed, his star faded. The once prized aristocrat of dark circles fell into disgrace, his power and privilege under threat. Desperation, not loyalty, became the driving force behind his next moves. And in that descent, Ollivander became a pawn. The books make it clear Garrick Ollivander's disappearance wasn't a random act of terror. It was strategic. He was targeted, stalked, and abducted under the direct influence and planning of Lucius Malfoy. As Dumbledore reveals in Half-Blood Prince, he has not been seen since last July. We can only assume that he has been taken by the Death Eaters. It wasn't merely Voldemort's whim. It was part of a greater plan to monopolize the production of wands, a key resource in the war that was brewing. Lucius knew this, and as a man once obsessed with blood purity, he now fixated on redeeming himself in Voldemort's eyes through acts of precise cruelty. The films, elegant and dramatic, chose a different path. They removed Lucius's active role in Ollivander's kidnapping. By the time we see the Wandmaker again, he is broken, imprisoned in Malfoy Manor, and terrified. But no hint is given to the audience that Lucius himself had orchestrated this fate. Instead, the visual narrative paints Lucius as sidelined, reluctantly housing Voldemort under his roof, powerless and ashamed. It's a portrait of defeat, but not of action. This omission dulls one of the most chilling transformations in Lucius's character, the moment he chooses to target a helpless craftsman in a bid for relevance. In the books, the Malfoy patriarch's fall from grace is not passive. He claws, scrapes, and betrays to climb back up. Capturing Ollivander was not a suggestion, it was a maneuver. It is heavily implied through conversations and context that Lucius orchestrated the capture, perhaps even oversaw it. Ollivander's knowledge was dangerous and precious. He understood the deep connections between wand and wizard. He knew how to trace the twin cause. He had seen Voldemort's wand and Harry's, and had spoken of their link. Lucius understood that knowledge like that could not be allowed to drift free in a time of war. Rowling doesn't spoon-feed the reader with a detailed account of Ollivander's abduction, but the trail of responsibility leads unmistakably to the Malfoys. When Harry is imprisoned in Malfoy Manor during Deathly Hallows, he sees Ollivander, frail and trembling, in the dungeon. There is no question who controls that prison. "He's been here for months," Ollivander whispers, his voice a whisper of itself. This is Lucius's house, his walls, his dungeon, his silence. That is complicity. That is power used as a cage. The movies, in softening Lucius, robbed the viewer of a brutal truth, that even cowards can be monsters. By reducing him to a sulking aristocrat in tailored robes, they remove the edge from his desperation. In the books, his involvement in Ollivander's abduction isn't just a footnote, it's a reflection of how far he is willing to fall to rise again. It speaks to the hierarchy of Voldemort's court, where loyalty is measured not in words but in sacrifices delivered. Lucius offered a man, a master wandmaker, as tribute. He did it not because he believed in the cause, but because he feared irrelevance more than morality. There's a chilling moment in Deathly Hallows when Bellatrix questions Griphook and Ollivander, their voices carrying the tremor of pain and obedience. Narcissa and Lucius remain in the background watching. Yet the power dynamic in that room is clear. The manor is theirs, and these prisoners are in their care. Lucius doesn't protest. He doesn't resist. He doesn't ask why a man is being tortured in his home. Because he already knows. Because he allowed it. Because long before the films decided to show him as a weakened father, Lucius Malfoy was a man who traded humanity for influence. The books are unrelenting in their portrayal. There is no redemption arc in Half-Blood Prince. There is no lingering glance of regret. There is only silence and shadows. Lucius, cast out by the Ministry, humiliated by his failure at the Department of Mysteries, now attempts to carve a path back into favour by offering tools and knowledge to the Dark Lord. The Ollivander abduction fits this motive with surgical precision. He did not need to draw blood himself. He merely had to open the door and close the cellar. In Half-Blood Prince, there's also an undercurrent of wand lore emerging as critical. When Harry questions the importance of Ollivander's disappearance, Dumbledore's face grows grim. "You may not yet understand how deeply the Dark Lord fears that which he does not understand." Voldemort's obsession with wand power, with dominance over all magic, required mastery over the Makers. Lucius gave him that. Lucius delivered the one man who could unlock the secrets of wand allegiance, and whose voice might have been one of the few that could have warned others. Number 18 became a symbol of aristocratic downfall. Lucius Malfoy once strode through the pages of Harry Potter with the cold confidence of a man bred to rule. A patriarch of ancient blood, a master of polished disdain, he embodied everything the old wizarding aristocracy stood for: purity, lineage, dominance. He wore his superiority like his black robes, immaculate, deliberate, designed to command a room before he even spoke. In The Chamber of Secrets, when he first appears at Flourish and Blots, his presence is sharp and invasive. He insults Arthur Weasley with a smirk, his cane topped with a silver snake gleaming in the light, and the scene crackles with the tension of class war. He doesn't need to draw a wand to assert power. His very existence is a threat, and he knows it. By the Deathly Hallows, however, Lucius no longer resembles the man who once whispered venom into the ears of Ministry officials. His decline is profound, both physically and symbolically, a slow unravelling of the illusion of superiority he once clung to. The book makes it unmistakably clear that he is not just suffering defeat, he is collapsing beneath the weight of everything he once believed in. His hair, once described as pale as moonlight and falling smoothly around his shoulders, is now dull and lank. His posture, once erect and regal, is slumped. When Harry sees him again at Malfoy Manor, the description is merciless. Lucius Malfoy's hair was dishevelled, his face gaunt, and his eyes sunken. This transformation is not just cosmetic, it reflects the death of a class, the final breath of a decaying ideology. Lucius Malfoy had built his identity on the foundation of blood purity and status, but that structure proved brittle when exposed to true terror. He had always served Voldemort with a calculated allegiance, close enough to gain power, distant enough to avoid risk. But once Voldemort returned in full and demanded true loyalty, Lucius found himself exposed, vulnerable, and ultimately broken. The aristocrat who once sneered at half-bloods and muggle-borns is now a man begging for his son's life. The movie adaptation captures some of this downfall, but only at the surface level. Jason Isaacs portrays Lucius with a haunted expression and trembling hands, but the depth of psychological disintegration found in the books is mostly absent. The film version leans into visual cues, tattered clothing, hesitant speech, but the internal decay, the soul-level disillusionment that defines book Lucius remains underexplored. Viewers see a frightened man, readers witness the disintegration of a legacy. In the book, Lucius' desperation reaches its peak during the sequence at Malfoy Manor. As Bellatrix tortures Hermione and Voldemort demands the Elder Wand, Lucius stands paralyzed. His authority in his own home has vanished. His wife is forced to act where he cannot. Narcissa takes control, shielding Draco, deceiving the Dark Lord, walking the tightrope of survival. Lucius, once the master of the household, is relegated to the margins. He speaks less. He influences nothing. This emasculation is no accident. It is J.K. Rowling's commentary on the fragility of inherited power. There is a haunting moment in The Deathly Hallows, where Lucius tries to find favour with Voldemort by offering to retrieve Harry from the dungeon. "My lord," he whispers, "my son, Draco." But Voldemort cuts him off with a sneer, silencing him like a servant. This is the moment Lucius becomes something less than human in the eyes of the Dark Lord. He's no longer useful, no longer feared. He is an artifact of a bygone age, kept around only as a reminder of what happens to those who serve, from cowardice rather than conviction. Lucius' fall also mirrors the collapse of the entire pure-blood supremacist ideology. The Malfoy name, once spoken with reverence and fear, becomes a joke whispered in the corridors of Hogwarts. The children of those who clung to bloodline pride now walk the battlefield with half-bloods and muggle-borns. The world Lucius tried to preserve through manipulation and fear is gone. All that remains is the shell of a man haunted by the truth he refused to believe. Blood is not destiny. In one of the final scenes of the book, after the Battle of Hogwarts, Lucius is described sitting with his wife and son, separate from both Death Eaters and Order members. None of them looked as though they had slept, Rowling writes. Lucius's face was as pale as ever, his hair lank, his eyes empty. It is a chilling image, not of a defeated villain, but of a man who has seen his world collapse and found nothing in its place. He is not dead, but there is no life in him. This Lucius is a monument to the cost of arrogance. He thought himself untouchable. He believed his name, his wealth, and his alliances would protect him from consequence. But when the reckoning came, they were paper shields against a storm. He tried to buy safety with favours, tried to trade others' lives for his own. And in doing so, he lost everything that once made him formidable. His fear became visible. His desperation smelled like blood. The difference between book and film lies in this rawness. The book does not allow Lucius dignity in his fall. He is not a tragic anti-hero. He is a cautionary tale. His decline is not romantic. It is degrading. The author does not ask us to pity him, but to understand what happens when pride is built on illusion. In contrast, the film offers a slightly more restrained arc. His cowardice is clear, but not his inner collapse. He becomes a background character, quietly defeated, but without the crushing weight of symbolism that the book insists upon. Lucius had always played the long game. In Goblet of Fire, he is seen among the masked Death Eaters at the Quidditch World Cup, burning tents and terrorizing muggles, yet denying involvement when questioned. He walks the knife edge between legality and allegiance, always ready to step back into the light if the tide turns. But the return of Voldemort removes that luxury. Now, loyalty requires action. Cowardice has no cover. When he loses the diary in Chamber of Secrets, it is the first true crack in his armor. Dobby's freedom, wrested from Lucius by a clever boy and a sock, is more than comic relief. It's the first time Lucius loses control, the first humiliation. He reacts with fury, almost cursing Harry before being stopped. That moment foreshadows what is to come, a man who believes in absolute control, but is slowly being stripped of it by forces he underestimates. As the Second Wizarding War progresses, Lucius becomes increasingly isolated. His allies either fall or switch sides. His access to power erodes. He loses his place on the Hogwarts board. He loses his influence at the Ministry. His home becomes a prison. Even his family suffers. Draco is forced into a life he never wanted, branded with the dark mark, pushed to commit murder. Lucius watches, helpless, as his son becomes a pawn in the very game he once orchestrated. And yet, for all his failures, Lucius never truly betrays Voldemort. He lacks the courage to defect, the moral clarity to repent. He remains in place, enduring humiliation after humiliation, hoping to survive. It is this inertia that defines his downfall more than any single moment. He is a man paralyzed by fear, clinging to status while everything meaningful slips away. It is a slow death of purpose. What makes Lucius so compelling is not that he is evil, but that he is weak. He begins as an image of power, but that power is brittle. When tested, it shatters. He never becomes a hero. He never seeks redemption. He simply recedes, leaving behind the echo of a name that once mattered. He represents not just the decline of a man, but the death of an idea, the myth of noble blood as moral worth. Even his final act, fleeing the battle with his wife and son, is not redemption, it is survival. He does not stand with Voldemort, nor does he join the defenders. He chooses his family, but not out of love, out of desperation. There is no fire left in him, no ideology, only the instinct to escape. This choice, while human, strips him of any remaining grandeur. He ends not as a warrior or martyr, but as a fugitive from his own past. Rowling's description of Lucius at the end is deliberate. She does not offer catharsis. There is no tearful reckoning, no dramatic confession. He is not forgiven, he is not condemned. He simply exists in the wreckage, staring blankly at a world that no longer makes space for him. He no longer looked like Lucius Malfoy, the book says. His hair was unkempt, his robes torn, and his face slack with defeat. That line says more than any monologue ever could. Lucius Malfoy in the books becomes a living ruin, a man whose legacy is a cautionary tale carved into trembling flesh and tarnished silver. He is what happens when pride is empty and power is borrowed. He is what remains when the masks fall and the truth becomes undeniable. And though the films hint at this, only the books force us to watch it unfold with cruel precision. Only the books demand that we see him, not as a villain, but as a monument to what was lost the moment the old world fell. Number 19. Distrusted Severus Snape. In the dark corners of the wizarding world, where alliances are whispered and trust is a rare currency, few relationships shimmered with as much restrained tension as that between Lucius Malfoy and Severus Snape. The films, with their sleek elegance and stylized dialogue, offered but a polished mirror of what the books laid bare, an uneasy alliance cracked by doubt and ambition. On screen, Lucius Malfoy appeared composed in the presence of Snape, offering the occasional nod, a shared look across the dim halls of Malfoy Manor or the Ministry. Their interactions were cold, yes, but they were void of friction. Yet in the pages of J.K. Rowling's text, something deeper simmered beneath the surface. An edge to Lucius's silence, a weight behind his watchful eyes. He did not trust Snape, not truly, and certainly not after Dumbledore began pulling the shadowy potions master into his fold. The books make it clear that Lucius, ever a strategist, viewed Snape as a rival cloaked in mystery. He understood the power of influence, having wielded it within the Ministry for years through manipulation and bribery. So when Dumbledore, his ideological enemy, began placing his trust in Severus, Lucius's suspicions ignited. What wizard of true dark loyalty would find favour in the eyes of Albus Dumbledore? To Lucius, the contradiction was glaring. "Dumbledore trusts him," Sirius Black sneered in Order of the Phoenix, echoing the very thought that kept Lucius awake. For Lucius, this was not proof of Snape's virtue. It was a red flag waving wildly. Lucius valued bloodlines, loyalty, and control. Snape, a half-blood from Spinner's End, offered none of these comforts. His intellect was undeniable, his power respected, but his loyalties were a locked chest. Even within the Death Eater circle, Snape's position was precarious. While Bellatrix snarled openly at him, Lucius played a quieter game. He never voiced his doubts in the open, but his choices betrayed him. When he advised Voldemort on strategic matters, Snape's name seldom came up. When he supported placing Barty Crouch Jr. in Hogwarts instead of pushing for Snape's elevation, it was a political maneuver to keep the half-blood in check. A telling moment emerges during Half-Blood Prince. Draco Malfoy, tasked with murdering Dumbledore, is sent on his mission while Snape hovers in the background, eventually taking the unbreakable vow with Narcissa. Lucius is notably absent from this desperate arrangement. Why? Because he is in Azkaban, yes, but the subtext rings louder. He is not part of the plan to save his own son. Snape is, and that silence is deafening. If Lucius had trusted Snape, if he had believed in the sincerity of his allegiance to Voldemort, he would have welcomed the vow. Instead, Narcissa seeks it in secret, hiding her desperation from her imprisoned husband. The rift between them is not accidental. It is born from uncertainty and pride. In Goblet of Fire, Lucius stands in the graveyard when Voldemort returns. The Dark Lord speaks, listing those who have disappointed him, those who will be punished. Snape's name does not arise, but Lucius is there, eyes flickering toward the man who had walked so delicately between two worlds. Snape, who had not gone to Azkaban. Snape, who claimed he had acted under Dumbledore's orders. And yet, here he was, welcomed back into the fold with a whisper of warning. Lucius had bled for the cause, Snape had not. The imbalance festered. Even the language of the books betrays Lucius's opinion. When characters like Sirius or even Bellatrix speak of Snape, the tone is charged confrontational. Lucius, however, remains smooth, his criticisms veiled, his distrust dressed in formality. "It's not our place to question the Dark Lord," he says, often when others raise concerns about Snape. But silence, in Lucius's world, is not approval, it is reservation. He measures his words as carefully as he measures allegiances. He does not accuse Snape, but he does not defend him either. That absence of loyalty is more condemning than open attack. Snape, in turn, understands Lucius's position. He does not seek his approval. He rarely addresses him directly in the books, and when he does, his tone is coldly professional. In the Order of the Phoenix, during meetings at Grimmauld Place, Snape and Lucius never exchange warm words. They stand on opposite ends of the ideological spectrum. Snape trusted by Dumbledore, Lucius by Voldemort. Their gazes might cross, but behind them lies a duel of intent. Each knows the other is hiding something. Each resents the other's place at the table. The films missed this tension, smoothing it into cinematic neutrality, but in the book, their mutual suspicion adds a layer of intrigue. When Snape finally kills Dumbledore, one might expect Lucius to celebrate, to finally embrace him as a loyal Death Eater. But that does not happen. There is no recorded celebration, no triumphant praise. Lucius remains subdued, overshadowed by his failures, and still distant from Snape. Voldemort praises Snape, yes, but Lucius remains an outsider, falling deeper into disfavor while Snape ascends. Lucius's suspicion finds its roots in classism as much as politics. A half-blood climbing the ladder of Voldemort's favor threatened the Malfoy legacy. Snape's genius challenged Lucius's influence. His access to both Dumbledore and Voldemort placed him in a unique, dangerous position, one Lucius could neither predict nor control. And Lucius hated what he could not control. He believed in hierarchy in the order of blood and power. Snape defied that order. The tension becomes clearest when Draco returns from Hogwarts after Dumbledore's death. Lucius, now disgraced, watches as Snape becomes headmaster. He says nothing in protest, but the silence is thick with humiliation. Snape had done what Lucius never could. He had not only stayed free but risen to power, and he had done it without needing the Malfoy name. That insult was personal. That elevation deepened the fracture. Bellatrix's suspicions of Snape were open flames. Lucius's were coals burning quietly. When Bellatrix demanded Snape explain himself in Half-Blood Prince, she did so in front of Narcissa, not Lucius. Why? Because Lucius did not need to be convinced. He already had his answer. Snape was dangerous, Snape was calculating, and Snape was, in the end, on his own side. Snape's actions during Deathly Hallows only confirmed Lucius's fears. As headmaster, he allowed Hogwarts to become a battlefield. He did not protect the Malfoy name. He did not favor Draco. Lucius, once the power broker of Slytherin, watched helplessly as Snape rewrote the script. And still, Lucius could not touch him. That impotence stung deeper than betrayal. Even Voldemort saw the divide. When he mocked Lucius during the final battle, demanding his wand, he looked past Snape. Snape, whom Lucius had never trusted, now stood where Lucius once had. The shift was undeniable. Power had passed from one snake to another. In the book, The Prince's Tale, after Snape's death, Harry defends him. He calls him the bravest man I ever knew. But Lucius never offers a word in memoriam. He retreats into obscurity, his house darkened, his name sullied. And Snape? Buried as a hero. To Lucius it must have felt like watching a ghost rise above him, one he never believed in, and never could. The irony is cutting. Lucius, who measured worth by heritage and appearance, was undone by a man he considered beneath him. Snape, whose origins were humble, triumphed not through charm or wealth, but through relentless strategy. Lucius had misjudged him. He had doubted the wrong man, and in that mistake he lost everything. What makes their Cold War so compelling is that neither ever needed to speak their hatred aloud. It lived in glances, in choices, in who they protected and who they left behind. When the battle lines were drawn, Lucius stood by his family. Snape stood by a memory, and both, in their own way, paid the price. The films captured the surface of their connection, but never the depth. Without the narration, the flick of a gaze or the absence of a line passed unnoticed. But in the books, every silence is a sentence, every absence is an accusation. Lucius Malfoy never trusted Severus Snape, not truly. He watched him rise, suspected his motives, feared his power, and in the end was left behind by the very man he had once dismissed. If Lucius had looked closer, he might have seen that Snape's loyalty, though buried under layers of pain, was real. Not to Voldemort, not to the cause, but to a promise, to a woman. But Lucius never saw love as strength, he saw it as weakness. And that blind spot cost him dearly. For in the end, Snape was the one who died with honor. Lucius was the one who lived with regret. Number 20. Secretly mocked the Minister for Magic. In the dim corridors of the Ministry of Magic, a dangerous dance unfolded, one not of wandlight or curses, but of smiles, nods, and words spoken too softly to be heard by all. Lucius Malfoy, the patriarch of one of the oldest pure-blood families in Wizarding Britain, moved through these halls not as a servant of the law, but as a silent puppeteer, weaving strands of power with a silken thread of contempt. His hair was always perfectly groomed, his robes immaculate, his voice smooth as velvet. And yet, beneath that surface, a quiet storm of disdain brewed. Lucius did not serve the ministry. He used it, bent it, and whispered into its ear like a serpent coiled around the bones of bureaucracy. Cornelius Fudge, the Minister for Magic, believed himself to be in command. He sat behind grand desks, passed decrees, and appeared in the Daily Prophet as the voice of authority. But when Lucius Malfoy stood in the same room, Fudge diminished, not by magic, not by force, but by the subtle erosion of confidence brought on by a man who pretended deference while insulting with every syllable. Lucius did not shout, he did not accuse, he suggested, hinted, and implied. His power came from what was left unsaid, from the way he placed a hand on Fudge's shoulder and smiled with all the warmth of a frozen lake. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, this power dynamic is laid bare. While the films soften Lucius, presenting him as formal and politely cold, the book strips him of that polish and reveals something far more unsettling, a man who weaponizes courtesy. During the confrontation at the Department of Mysteries, he appears not merely as a Death Eater, but as someone who feels entirely above the chaos he causes. When he addresses Cornelius Fudge, there is no respect, only condescension wrapped in formality. Fudge is not a minister in Lucius's eyes. He is an errand boy, an unfortunate muggle-born replacement for the true order of things. Earlier in the book, Lucius's manipulation is more insidious. He never raises his voice to Fudge, but he controls conversations with surgical precision. When Fudge discusses Dumbledore's behavior and Harry's delusions, Lucius always appears nearby, lingering just within earshot, or offering opinions that masquerade as concern. At one point, Fudge listens more intently to Malfoy's whispers than to the warnings of his own advisers. The ministry is not run by democracy or reason. It is pulled on strings by men like Lucius, whose fortunes and bloodlines allow them access to corridors far darker than those patrolled by auras. In the films, much of this nuance is lost. Jason Isaacs portrays Lucius with icy precision, but the screen rarely allows space for his quiet scheming. Instead, he appears at official events, the Quidditch World Cup, the Department of Mysteries, and speaks in tones that suggest elitism, but lack the cutting contempt of the book. He is portrayed more as a dangerous aristocrat than a manipulative puppet master. The lines are delivered with stern arrogance, not with the poisonous smile that characterizes his book counterpart. The film Lucius is a villain. The book Lucius is a shadow behind the throne. Nowhere is this more clear than in the way Lucius advises Cornelius Fudge. In the novel, Lucius is often seen speaking with Fudge in corners, and their conversations carry a weight that suggests more than casual dialogue. He is not simply sharing his views, he is shaping policy. Many of the people in the Department of Mysteries, well, they're loyal to Dumbledore, he says with a lilt of concern that drips with derision. Fudge, desperate for allies and validation, clings to Lucius's every word. Malfoy, with centuries of influence behind him, senses this weakness and presses his advantage with surgical glee. There is a critical scene where Fudge hesitates to believe Dumbledore's warning about Voldemort's return. Lucius seizes on this moment to stoke doubt. He implies that Dumbledore is senile, that Harry is unwell, and that the Ministry would do better focusing on real dangers like public panic and disloyalty. The Ministry's oppressive turn, the appointment of Dolores Umbridge, the discrediting of the Order, bears Lucius's fingerprints. He does not wear a mask, but he does wear the expression of a man who believes the Ministry belongs to him by right. His wealth buys influence, but it is his contempt that gives it form. This manipulation is never overt. Lucius never says, "Do as I say," but his tone makes clear that deviation from his desires would be foolish. His confidence stems from a lifetime of having doors opened before he reaches them. The way he walks into a room, expecting attention, reveals a man unused to challenge. And when Fudge responds with uncertainty, Lucius's voice grows more gentle, more reasonable, as if speaking to a child. "Surely, Cornelius, you don't believe him over the words of the Wizengamot," he says, voice heavy with mock concern. In private, Lucius laughs at Fudge. That much is clear in the book's prose, even if it's never stated. His very presence mocks the structure of wizarding government. He operates in shadows, in smoky back rooms with gold and bloodlines as his weapons. "I can assure you, Minister," he says on one occasion, "that my only concern is the safety of the wizarding community." But his eyes say otherwise. Safety to Lucius means purity. It means obedience. It means removing voices like Harry's and Dumbledore's that challenge his rightful place at the top. The films, bound by runtime and dramatic structure, reduce these complexities. Lucius appears only when the plot demands it, and his manipulation is often lost behind wand duels and sharp glances. He is a villain in service of Voldemort, not a man who believes he is the Ministry. The screen removes his most damning trait, the belief that he is untouchable. In the books, he's not merely a Death Eater. He is a symbol of how evil can wear silk robes and hold shares in newspapers. His control over the Daily Prophet is another subtle layer of power. It is Lucius who suggests what stories are printed, who funds campaigns to vilify Dumbledore, who ensures that Harry is painted as delusional. The wizarding world's media is not impartial. It is bought, twisted, and reshaped to serve those like Malfoy. And Fudge, too proud to see the strings, dances to music that Lucius conducts with a silent wand. Even Umbridge, who operates with her own brand of cruelty, is not immune to Lucius's influence. She acts with the confidence of someone who knows she is supported from above. Lucius rarely needs to threaten. A word from him, a glance, a hand placed gently on a chair, is enough. In Order of the Phoenix, when Harry is expelled, it is Lucius who suggests it before Fudge can even finish his sentence. If a student behaves so recklessly, surely expulsion is appropriate, he murmurs. The minister nods, lips pursed, pretending the idea was his own. Lucius Malfoy does not shout, but he is louder than any decree. The book reveals him as a man whose every move is calculated, whose every phrase carries double meaning. He smiles at Fudge while rolling his eyes behind his back. He offers advice laced with poison. He praises decisions that benefit only him. This duplicity is essential to understanding the corruption that seeps through the Ministry during the 5th book. Voldemort's return is not the only threat. It is the system itself, with men like Lucius behind the scenes, that proves most dangerous. When Fudge finally sees Voldemort with his own eyes, it is too late. The damage has been done. The Order is branded traitorous, Hogwarts has been infiltrated, and Harry has suffered publicly. Lucius stands to the side, quietly satisfied. His hands are clean, his words innocent, but every ruinous policy, every silenced voice bears his scent. He does not need to kill to cause destruction. He only needs to suggest, to guide, to lean ever so slightly on the shoulders of weaker men. In the battle at the Department of Mysteries, Lucius appears in his truest form, no longer pretending, no longer polite. The mask drops. He speaks not to Fudge, but to Harry, and the disdain in his voice is cold and clear. "You should have stayed out of this, boy," he says, and the veil of civility vanishes. But the damage has been done long before wands are drawn. Lucius's true victory is not in spells cast, but in months of manipulation, in whispers that turned a government into a weapon. This is the Lucius Malfoy the films fail to fully explore. He is more than a pure-blood supremacist. He is a political parasite, one who smiles at his victims while feeding on their fears. Fudge is merely one among many. The entire ministry bends to Lucius not because of curses or imperious charms, but because they fear being left behind by a man who seems to own the future. Lucius knows this, and it amuses him. He does not crave glory, he craves control. And in the pages of Order of the Phoenix, we see him at his peak. Elegant, powerful, and quietly monstrous. The films give us his shadow, the book gives us his soul. Number 21 supported the ministry's new regime. Lucius Malfoy in the Harry Potter films is a man of posture, a shadowed aristocrat draped in black robes with long silver hair and a snake-headed cane. He brandishes more as a symbol than a weapon. He appears elegant and cruel, powerful and slippery, dangerous and doomed. But the man in the books, the Lucius, crafted by J.K. Rowling's pen, is far more than an accessory to Voldemort's aesthetic. He is a politician, a master manipulator of magical bureaucracy, a man who once walked the corridors of the Ministry of Magic with the confidence of a landowner surveying his estate. And when Voldemort returned, Lucius didn't just bow to him, he saw opportunity. He believed in something more than power through terror. He believed in a vision, one of systemic change, one of pure blood supremacy carved into law, into education, into every bureaucratic corner of the magical world. In the books, Lucius was not merely a follower of the Dark Lord, he was an architect of change, or at least he thought himself to be. After Voldemort's return, the Ministry of Magic slowly bent under the weight of influence. Once Cornelius Fudge resigned, and Pius Thicknesser, under the Imperious Curse, took control, the ministry became a mirror of Lucius's deepest ambitions. He welcomed the shift not as a frightened servant, but as a nobleman, seeing his ideals finally institutionalized. "The ministry has fallen. Scrimgeour is dead. They are coming." These chilling words, delivered by Rufus Scrimgeour before his execution, signaled a turning point, but for Lucius it was a culmination of years spent pulling strings. Lucius used his wealth and name to encourage laws that mirrored Voldemort's ideology, but with a touch of ministry polish. He championed the idea that magical bloodlines must be protected. His speeches at the Wizengamot, when he still held influence, were laced with the rhetoric of tradition and purity. He argued for the removal of Muggle-borns from positions of power, claiming they diluted the sacred customs of wizarding heritage. In The Half-Blood Prince, although not as visible on the page, the implication is clear. Lucius's imprisonment after the Department of Mysteries was not merely a punishment, it was a political setback. His dreams of guiding a new regime faltered, but they did not die. The book version of Lucius is ruthless in his belief that the ministry should reflect the values of the old wizarding families. His loyalty was not to Voldemort as a person, but to a system where people like Lucius Malfoy would thrive, where heritage was law, and where opposition was erased through official channels, not just death threats. He was not a street enforcer of evil, he was its lawyer, its lobbyist, its cloak-wrapped whisperer in government offices. In the Order of the Phoenix, when Dolores Umbridge rises through the ranks with ministry support, Lucius is one of the key financial and ideological backers. Though his name is never directly linked, the policies she enforces, especially her educational decrees, reflect his vision of a Hogwarts purged of undesirables. One of the clearest signs of Lucius's ambition for political influence lies in the role he plays in pushing the idea that Dumbledore and Harry Potter are delusional. He is not simply trying to protect Voldemort's secrecy, he's orchestrating a coup of perception. If he can help make Dumbledore look mad and Harry a reckless boy, then the reins of educational and governmental reform can be seized by people who think like him. It's not about wand duels in back alleys, it's about writing laws that make Muggle-born education illegal. That is the Lucius Malfoy of the books, a man whose war is waged in offices, not just dungeons. In the films, these intricate political threads unravel into shallow displays of fear and snivelling loyalty. Lucius becomes a caricature of a frightened noble, quivering at Voldemort's feet, desperate to win favour with cowardly glances and hollow bravado. His involvement with the Ministry is barely acknowledged. His ideological motives are lost. Instead of a man reshaping a nation, he becomes a man surviving chaos. While Jason Isaacs delivers a brilliant performance with what he's given, the script reduces Lucius to a frightened father and failed Death Eater. His obsession with pure-blood dominance, his cunning use of legal systems, and his deep involvement in the transformation of wizarding society are not just softened, they're erased. In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, Lucius's push to remove Dumbledore is strategic. He doesn't merely want to replace a headmaster, he wants to replace a culture. By planting Tom Riddle's diary into Ginny Weasley's possession, he's attempting to create a crisis that will justify a leadership shift. This is a man who weaponizes chaos for structural gain. He hopes the attacks on students will lead to panic, and that panic will lead to reform led by people like him. You'll find that Dumbledore is no longer here to protect you, he tells Harry, with that trademark contempt. It's a threat, yes, but also a glimpse into his belief that Dumbledore's removal is a necessary step toward a new magical order. His vision of reform extends to education itself. Lucius pushes for the revision of the Hogwarts curriculum, arguing that students should learn respectable magic and avoid dangerous influences like Muggle studies or care of magical creatures. He is thrilled when Umbridge cancels practical defense against the dark arts lessons. In Order of the Phoenix, the Educational Decree No. 22 allows the Ministry to appoint its own candidate as headmaster, opening the door for bureaucratic control of magical education. Lucius does not publicly appear during this maneuver, but it carries the fingerprints of his long-term strategy: control the young, and you control the future. When Voldemort takes over the Ministry, Lucius doesn't retreat at first. He is in the room during major policy decisions, including the creation of the Muggle-born Registration Commission. This commission, led by Umbridge but supported by others like Yaxley, is designed to interrogate and incarcerate Muggle-borns who cannot prove their magical heritage. Though not named as a chair, Lucius's approval of such institutional cruelty is implied through his silence and status. These were no longer rogue actions by extremists, these were laws, stamped with ministry seals and defended with ministry wands. Lucius was never more satisfied than when bigotry wore a suit and carried a clipboard. Yet for all his manipulations, Lucius's ideal world begins to slip from his fingers. His failure at the Department of Mysteries costs him more than his freedom. It costs him influence. Voldemort no longer trusts him with major operations. His home becomes a prison, literally, as Malfoy Manor is converted into a base for Death Eaters. Lucius watches as the very movement he helped empower becomes uncontrollable, brutal, unsophisticated. He is not a man made for war. He is a man made for parliaments, and Voldemort does not want politicians anymore. He wants fanatics and soldiers. By the time we reach Deathly Hallows, Lucius is a husk of his former self. Yet this decline is far more powerful in the book, where his earlier ambitions are fully fleshed out. His desperation to find Harry during the Battle of the Seven Potters is not merely out of fear. It is the final gasp of a man trying to restore his place in the new order. "My lord, I have always been your most faithful." But Voldemort is no longer listening. Lucius's power has faded not because his beliefs have changed, but because the game he played turned into something more monstrous than he had planned. And monsters don't keep their scribes. Narcissa, unlike Lucius, begins to see that family matters more than ideology. She lies to Voldemort at the end of Deathly Hallows, not just to save Harry, but to save Draco. Lucius follows, limping behind. His failure is not just political, but personal. His dreams of a ministry reshaped in his image have crumbled into ash. But the books never let you forget that he once had those dreams, that he once believed he could change the world through law, through education, through power that didn't need to shout or curse. His final appearance at the Great Hall after the Battle of Hogwarts is not one of redemption, but of exile. He stands at the margins, his family broken, his cause lost. No one welcomes him, no one thanks him. And still he does not apologize, because Lucius Malfoy was not made to repent, he was made to rule. And without a system to rule, he is nothing. The tragedy of Lucius Malfoy is not that he turned evil, it is that he turned logical. He believed in systems, not in chaos. He trusted that government, when held by the right people, could enforce purity without needing violence. That Hogwarts, under the proper influence, could produce generations of obedient wizards. That the ministry could be moulded like clay, pure blood clay. But Voldemort never cared for laws or votes, and so Lucius found himself serving a master who made the very system he cherished obsolete. This complexity is entirely missing in the films. They present him as a coward with a fancy wand, a decorative villain more concerned with his own safety than the future of wizard kind, his political ambitions, his ideological extremism, his use of bureaucratic tools to reshape society, all stripped away. What remains is a frightened man with trembling hands and vacant threats. The Lucius of the books could have been a minister of magic. Had history taken a different turn, the Lucius of the films would never dare to enter the atrium alone. By ignoring his political role, the films reduce the stakes of the ministry's fall. Viewers never see how insidious the takeover truly was, how the laws twisted quietly before the war turned loud. They miss the chilling horror of a government that becomes evil not with curses, but with paperwork. And they miss Lucius Malfoy, the man who helped make it happen, not with a wand, but with a pen. Number 22 abused Dobby for years. Lucius Malfoy, as presented in the films, is undoubtedly a cruel man. He is cold, calculating, and treats Dobby with disdain. He snaps commands, stares icily, and ultimately loses his temper when Dobby gains freedom. Yet this cinematic version only scratches the surface. The Lucius of the books is not just an arrogant aristocrat, he is a tormentor. His cruelty towards Dobby is not a footnote, but a defining feature of their relationship, steeped in systemic abuse that the films soften, if not ignore. The full extent of Lucius Malfoy's tyranny reveals a man who used his house elf not as a servant, but as a personal outlet for rage, a disposable object, and a captive, silenced by enchantments and fear. In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, when Harry first meets Dobby, the elf is shaking, stammering, and physically punishing himself for every sentence that hints at life inside the Malfoy household. His fear is visceral. He smashes his head against a window, irons his hands, and even threatens to throw himself down a flight of stairs. These are not exaggerated gestures of loyalty, they are the behaviors of a creature so conditioned by punishment that any act of speech feels like betrayal. Dobby is used to death threats, sir, he says with a kind of trembling acceptance that no 12-year-old reader should feel comfortable with. The books paint a far darker picture of what Lucius imposed than what any film camera dared to show. The language used in the novels to describe Dobby's suffering is meticulous. There is never a moment when Dobby speaks of Lucius without visible physical consequences. This is not theatrical, it's a coded cry for help. J.K. Rowling repeatedly returns to the motif of Dobby's self-punishment, not for comedic relief, but as a narrative device underscoring the depths of his trauma. Dobby is not a quirky character in these pages, he is a slave, and Lucius is not just a harsh master. He is an abuser cloaked in wealth and political influence, given the power to torment without scrutiny. When Dobby tries to warn Harry about the danger at Hogwarts, he literally endangers himself. His voice shakes, his actions become frantic, he irons his fingers and beats his head. These reactions are not voluntary. Lucius has placed him under a powerful binding spell that forbids him from speaking ill of the Malfoy family. This magical gag doesn't just silence, it creates psychological imprisonment. Dobby is not just physically trapped, his thoughts are policed, his memory conditioned by fear. Lucius went beyond cruelty. He molded Dobby into a creature who feared thought itself. Lucius's abuse is never directly shown in the books, but it doesn't need to be. The evidence is written into Dobby's every gesture. When he tells Harry that Dobby had to punish himself, sir, it's not said with pride or tradition. It's whispered with the resignation of a victim who sees no alternative. Lucius built a world for Dobby where fear was normal, where obedience was enforced through pain, and where any deviation from silence could warrant mutilation. This is a household governed by magical terror, not just rigid rules. The Malfoy estate, with its elegant halls and silver-lined corridors, is a facade. Beneath the grandeur lies a prison. Dobby's inability to speak openly about his life is more telling than any direct description of abuse. Rowling deliberately leaves those dark specifics to the reader's imagination, but the contours are clear. Lucius was the kind of master who didn't need to raise his wand to assert power. His presence alone was enough to reduce a being to a quivering mess. The films bypass this slow horror. They offer visual cues, but they mute the psychological depth. When Dobby is finally freed, thanks to Harry's cunning placement of a sock in Tom Riddle's diary, Lucius reacts with more than rage. He reacts with humiliation. He turns on Harry, barely containing his fury. His fury is not the anger of a man who lost a servant. It is the wrath of a tyrant who lost control over property. "You've lost me my servant," he snarls, but it is the second part of that moment that matters. He nearly curses Harry, and only Dobby's intervention saves him. That scene, brief in the film, is explosive in the book, charged with themes of pride, slavery, and rebellion. Lucius is not just angry, he is stunned that a thing dared to be free. What the films never explore is that Lucius saw Dobby not as a lesser creature, but as an extension of his own ego. Dobby was his instrument, his shadow, something he could harm at will and silence with a thought. The idea that Dobby had the right, or the audacity, to seek freedom was not just offensive to Lucius. It was unthinkable. It shattered the illusion that the Malfoys' way of life was eternal. If a house elf could break the chains, what else might fall? His outrage is not emotional, it is existential. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, we see Dobby again. By then he's free, working at Hogwarts, paid and clothed. His transformation is profound, but so is the reminder of his past. He still flinches, he still refers to his time with the Malfoys in hushed tones. When he brings Harry socks, it is not just a quirky gift, it is symbolic of his liberation. In those socks lies the memory of pain, the act of rebellion, and the price of freedom. Lucius's legacy lingers, even when his presence is gone. Dobby's trauma is not erased by his freedom. In Order of the Phoenix, he still speaks in fragments when referring to the bad dark wizards, and it takes effort for him to express open opinions. This shows the long-lasting scars left by Lucius. Abuse doesn't end with emancipation, it leaves marks, patterns, responses. The films move on, the books do not. Rowling gives space to Dobby's healing, and in doing so forces the reader to remember where he came from and who held the leash. Lucius is a man who not only dominated others, but demanded their silence. This is perhaps the darkest aspect of his cruelty. Dobby wasn't just forbidden to speak, he was cursed to suffer when he tried. That silence is central to Lucius's character. It reflects the broader culture of fear he represented, a man who believed blood was destiny, a man who felt entitled to ownership of lives, a man who viewed compassion as weakness and control as divine right. When the Department of Magical Law Enforcement searched the Malfoy Manor, they found dark artifacts, but no one found the echoes of pain that clung to its walls. No ministry official documented the bruises hidden under house elf skin or the enchantments layered into Dobby's psyche. Lucius was too careful, too polished. His cruelty wore a mask of civility. That is what makes it more frightening. A madman with a wand is dangerous, yes, but a nobleman who torments without leaving a mark, he is untouchable. Even when Lucius falls from power, his disgrace after Voldemort's return, his failed missions, his shame at the ministry, he never shows remorse. He doesn't evolve. He simply becomes bitter. His hatred remains intact. He mourns status, not sin. In Deathly Hallows, when the tables turn, and his family is at Voldemort's mercy, Lucius does not rise. He grovels, but his fear is not for the people he hurt. It is for the legacy he's losing. The same sense of control that once allowed him to own Dobby now crumbles under the weight of irrelevance. The films reduce Lucius's decline to a matter of prestige. The books show the deeper rot. He is a man unfit for freedom himself because he never respected the freedom of others. His castle becomes his cage, and Dobby, the elf he once silenced, becomes a symbol of defiance. His death is not just a loss, it is a reminder that freedom has a price, that dignity must be defended, and that abusers, no matter how noble their name, always fall. The starkest contrast between book and film lies in this. In the films, Lucius is a villain. In the books, he is a symbol of systemic oppression. His treatment of Dobby is not a subplot, it is a testament to the hidden horrors of magical society. The laws that protect wizards do not protect elves. The smiles of the Malfoys do not reach their servants. The glamour of their wealth masks a rot that seeps into every corner of their home. When Dobby dies in Deathly Hallows, buried with no magic, hands washed by Harry Potter himself, the circle is complete. He died not as a slave, but as a friend. And in that grave, Lucius's legacy is buried too, because for all his power, Lucius could not erase what Dobby had become. The elf he broke became a warrior, the servant he silenced became a martyr, and the man who once owned him was left with nothing but silence. Lucius Malfoy's cruelty towards Dobby is not a side detail, it is his defining failure. It is a mirror into his soul, a reflection of how power corrupts, how control consumes, and how even in a world of magic, the worst horrors are the ones no spell can undo. Dobby's flinches, his stammers, his bruises, each is a chapter in a story the films only whisper. But the books, they scream. Number 23 feared Voldemort more than he believed in him. Lucius Malfoy, once the embodiment of aristocratic pride and pure-blood supremacy, stood tall in the early chapters of the Harry Potter saga. Yet as the shadow of Lord Voldemort thickened over the wizarding world, the man who once walked with a cane of polished serpent silver began to shrink. In the books, the transformation of Lucius is painful, obvious, and deeply human. His loyalties unravel not because of ideology or loss of privilege, but because fear corrodes every inch of his posture. He is not a servant of the Dark Lord out of reverence. He is a man running from the certainty of ruin if he dares to resist. This fear reveals itself slowly but unmistakably, beginning with the events at the Department of Mysteries in Order of the Phoenix. Here, Lucius leads the assault, tasked with recovering the prophecy. But he isn't commanding with confidence, he is carrying out the order with the desperation of someone who cannot afford failure. His insistence on recovering the prophecy, his harshness, and his final collapse after the mission fails all reflect a man who is painfully aware of what awaits him when he returns empty-handed. J.K. Rowling writes, "He was sprawled on the floor, unconscious." This isn't just a physical fall, it's a symbolic one. His status, his influence, his illusion of control all shatter with the failure in the Department of Mysteries. After Azkaban, the difference becomes stark. In Half-Blood Prince, Lucius does not utter a single line, and yet his silence echoes louder than words. He has lost the confidence he once wielded like a blade. The fall from grace is complete. Voldemort no longer trusts him. His failure has cost the Dark Lord a prophecy, and now it is Draco, his only son, who is forced to pay the price. This punishment is not just strategic, it is psychological. Voldemort is reminding Lucius that his family is not off-limits. He is reminding Lucius that mercy is not in his vocabulary. The anguish becomes more visible in Deathly Hallows when Harry, Ron, and Hermione are captured and brought to Malfoy Manor. The contrast between the proud man of earlier books and the shattered one who greets the prisoners is shocking. Lucius pleads with Bellatrix to confirm the boy's identity, desperate to offer Voldemort a prize that might redeem him. "If we are the ones to hand Potter over to the Dark Lord, everything will be forgiven," he says. But there's no fire in his words, no devotion, just terror. He wants his life back. He wants his family back. But most of all, he wants to stop living under the threat of Voldemort's wrath. This moment in the book is a turning point. Lucius no longer cares for the ideals he once espoused. The talk of blood purity, the sneering at Muggle-borns, it all fades beneath the weight of fear. His actions become more erratic, more selfish. He's no longer fighting for Voldemort. He's just trying to survive him. And in doing so, he jeopardizes everything he once claimed to love, including his own family. Draco is no longer just a symbol of legacy. He becomes a pawn in Voldemort's cruel game, and Lucius, paralyzed by fear, does nothing to stop it. In contrast, the films reduce this internal chaos to mere posture. Jason Isaacs portrays Lucius with elegance and menace, but the script never digs deep enough. We see the fear in his eyes, we sense the hesitation in his voice, but the inner disintegration, the desperation, the guilt, the slow realization that he has lost everything is not given the room to unfold. The camera captures his tension, but the script denies us the intimacy of his collapse. The Lucius of the films is still menacing, still a shadowy aristocrat. The Lucius of the books is a man unraveling at the seams. In the book version of Deathly Hallows, as the final battle approaches, Lucius is no longer concerned with Voldemort's cause. His only concern is the return of his son. He paces the floor, begs for Draco, and finally joins his wife Narcissa in abandoning the battlefield altogether. They do not fight. They do not rally. They leave quietly, even shamefully. J.K. Rowling does not dramatize the moment. They simply walk away. And that quiet retreat says everything. The man who once paraded the halls of the ministry is now willing to lose his honor for the sake of his child. Lucius's failure as a father and husband isn't from neglect. It comes from cowardice. He allows his fear to compromise the safety of those closest to him. He opens the doors of Malfoy Manor to Voldemort, turning his ancestral home into a den of horror. It becomes the place where people are tortured, where lives are ended, and where Voldemort's snake, Nagini, sleeps beside corpses. The Malfoy name becomes synonymous not with power, but with complicity. And Lucius, who once took pride in legacy, watches in silence as that legacy is corrupted beyond repair. The use of Draco as a punishment in Half-Blood Prince is one of the clearest indicators that Voldemort no longer views Lucius as useful. It is a calculated humiliation. Voldemort tasks Draco with murdering Dumbledore, not because he believes the boy can do it, but because he wants the entire Malfoy family to live in fear. Lucius, who once used his son's status to his advantage, now sees that same status turned into a death sentence. And he does nothing. Not because he agrees, not because he is loyal, but because he is terrified. In the book, Narcissa's role in this spiral is pivotal. She, unlike her husband, makes a decision based on love. She lies to Voldemort during the Battle of Hogwarts, telling him that Harry is dead only because she wants to know if Draco is alive. That one moment of courage and maternal instinct changes the course of the war. Lucius, by contrast, is absent in this act of bravery. He watches. He waits. He follows. It is Narcissa who leads the family out of the fire, not Lucius. His fear has consumed his initiative. The complexity of Lucius in the novels lies in this juxtaposition. He is not evil in the way Voldemort is. He is not even cruel in the way Bellatrix is. He is a man who has made compromises, who has walked too far into the dark, and who finds himself too frightened to return. He is Shakespearean in his fall, proud, vain, and ultimately weak. His punishment is not death. It is irrelevance. Voldemort stops speaking to him, stops looking at him. He is cast out, but still alive, forced to witness the unraveling of everything he once controlled. The novels give Lucius a moral trajectory that is not redemptive, but revealing. He is a mirror to every coward who aligns with power out of fear rather than belief. He reminds us that evil does not always roar. Sometimes it cowers in the corner, hoping no one notices. Sometimes it smiles at tyranny because it is easier than resisting. Lucius doesn't believe in the vision of a purified magical world. He believes in comfort, status, safety, and when those are threatened, his moral backbone crumbles into dust. The storytelling brilliance in Rowling's treatment of Lucius lies in the subtlety. She does not grant him a redemption arc. There is no moment where he sacrifices himself, no scene of atonement. Instead, he fades, he stumbles, he disappears from the final battle, not with a bang, but with the silence of someone who no longer has the strength to pretend. That silence is his judgment, and it is devastating. The man who once ruled a mansion now flees like a criminal, not because he was defeated by courage, but because he never had any to begin with. Quotes from the book reinforce this descent. When Voldemort returns in Goblet of Fire, Lucius is there, grovelling. My lord, I prostrate myself before you," he whispers. And it is not a declaration of loyalty, it is a plea, a terrified attempt to preserve himself in the face of wrath. Later, in Deathly Hallows, his tone changes. He no longer grovels, he whimpers, he no longer tries to appear useful, he simply tries not to be noticed. Each change in tone reveals another layer stripped away. The Malfoy Manor scenes are a masterclass in psychological collapse. The dungeon beneath their home becomes a metaphor for Lucius's own imprisonment. He is trapped in a house that no longer belongs to him, surrounded by killers, ruled by fear. When Hermione is tortured above, he does not intervene. When Griphook is dragged down, he does not object. He watches, always watching, never acting. His cane is gone. His voice is gone. All that remains is the shell of a man who once thought he controlled the world. Even his interactions with his wife become strained. Narcissa, who was once his partner in social maneuvering, grows colder toward him. She acts where he falters. She lies to save her son. She protects Draco while Lucius fails. And this imbalance erodes what little dignity Lucius has left. He is no longer the head of the family. He is a frightened bystander in his own home. And the books let you feel that loss. Page after page, he becomes smaller. Page after page, the fear swallows him whole. The most haunting part is that Lucius knows. He is aware that his downfall is of his own making. He chose Voldemort. He chose the mask. He chose to let fear be his compass. And now, with Voldemort living under his roof, he is living in the consequence. He doesn't fight in the final battle because he has nothing left to fight for. Voldemort is not a leader to him. He is a monster he cannot escape. And so he runs. And in that flight we see the truth. Lucius Malfoy feared Voldemort more than he ever loved him. Number 24. Ridiculed members of the Order of the Phoenix. Lucius Malfoy never saw the Order of the Phoenix as anything more than a scattered band of fools. In the world of the books, his disdain for them bleeds through the pages with scathing certainty. He never shied away from expressing that disdain, particularly when in the company of those who shared his values, wealth, blood purity, and the maintenance of the old magical order. Lucius, elegant and cruel, did not just oppose the order, he looked upon it as one would a pile of garbage left rotting in a forgotten alleyway. He ridiculed them not for their power but for their ideals, which to him were naive, weak, and, most unforgivable of all, unpure. The films, though stylized and dramatic, mute this defining trait. They leave his lips too silent, his contempt diluted. Where the books burn with venom, the screen only simmers. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Rowling paints Lucius as a man oozing with superiority, especially in the Ministry of Magic scene. He is calm, composed, and brimming with contempt as he faces members of the Order. His attack is not just magical, it is intellectual, social, and ideological. He refers to the Order's members as if they are stray dogs barking at giants. His most acidic words are directed at Arthur Weasley, whom he sees not just as a blood traitor, but a mockery of the pure blood heritage. A disgrace to the name of wizard, Lucius had once called him, long before the actual battle. Arthur's devotion to muggles and his modest lifestyle were personal insults to Lucius's entire belief system. That Arthur would dare oppose him as an equal in the ministry was nothing short of an affront. Mundungus Fletcher, with his dishonest ways and stench of the streets, infuriated Lucius not because of his criminal leanings, but because he represented the filth of the magical underworld the Order so hypocritically embraced. Fletcher was a symbol of what Lucius most despised, those without pedigree, without polish, claiming a seat at the table of magical politics. In private conversations, Lucius would refer to him as a rat in wizard's robes, believing his presence among the Order's ranks a mockery of all things noble. To Lucius, Mundungus standing in defiance of the Death Eaters was no different than a beggar spitting at a king. He laughed at the absurdity, not because he underestimated them, but because he found their aspirations laughable. In the films we see Lucius sneer, we see him act with malice, but the venom is restrained. There is no moment where he publicly ridicules Arthur Weasley or mocks Fletcher, with the eloquent scorn that defines him in the books. The screen favours theatrical violence over psychological cruelty. Jason Isaacs, who portrays Lucius, brings a chilling charisma to the role, but the script denies him the layered dialogue that defines his ideological battle with the Order. The ministry battle in the film captures chaos and fury, but it loses the underlying insult, the idea that Lucius never feared these people, only despised them. During the climactic ministry battle in the book, Lucius's presence is not merely combative, it is commanding. He speaks on behalf of Voldemort's absent authority, directing Death Eaters with a sharp tongue and sharper instincts. His words to Harry, when demanding the prophecy, are not just commands, they are laced with the superiority of someone who views this entire rebellion as a childish game. "You do not give a wizard like me instructions, Potter," he says, refusing to be seen as anything less than aristocracy. His tone, his diction, his cold control, everything about him screams a belief in class, blood, and status. What makes his disdain so effective in the books is that it never seems forced. Lucius does not need to raise his voice. He never acts out of panic. He looks at people like Tonks and Kingsley Shacklebolt and sees pawns in a game he's already won. When Dumbledore forms the Order of the Phoenix, Lucius scoffs at the very idea that such a ragtag coalition could matter. The old ways, the sacred families, those were the forces that ruled the wizarding world, and anything else was a temporary nuisance. He would rather mock the Order than acknowledge them as a threat, and in that hubris lies the seed of his eventual ruin. His treatment of Arthur Weasley is particularly vicious. Lucius never forgave Arthur for trying to expose his dealings with dark artifacts. The animosity runs deep, laced not just with politics but personal vendetta. "You'll never outgrow your flea-bitten shack, Weasley," Lucius had once hissed in a corridor confrontation. "But do remember, it's not a home that makes a man, it's blood." In these cruel barbs, we see not just rivalry, but a rejection of Arthur's very existence. To Lucius, Arthur was not a peer, but a parasite. The fact that they shared space in the ministry was, to him, an offence to wizarding civilization. His humiliation in the ministry battle becomes a powerful counterpoint to his arrogance. When the prophecy is destroyed and Dumbledore arrives, Lucius is no longer composed, he falters, grasping for authority that slips through his fingers like sand. This is the moment that breaks his illusion of supremacy. He had entered the ministry with the pride of a general. He leaves it as a disgraced aristocrat. The books do not shy away from this fall. They do not protect his dignity. They expose his failure in full daylight. His failure is not just military, it is ideological. The Order, in all its diversity and disunity, has stood its ground. The pure-blood dream has cracked. Lucius's belief that power belongs only to those of noble bloodlines is undone not by force, but by the cooperation of those he mocked. Kingsley, half-blood; Tonks, a metamorphmagus of mixed heritage; Arthur, a blood traitor; and even Fletcher, that rat, all fought with more heart than Lucius ever imagined. It is not lost on the reader that Lucius, with all his grandeur, loses to the very people he scorned as unworthy. The absence of this ideological collapse in the films makes Lucius's fall feel less poetic. He is caught, yes, but the gravity of his humiliation is lessened. He is shown imprisoned, but we do not see the moment his belief system fractures. The book delivers this with clarity. His arrogance is his undoing. When Voldemort punishes him by taking his home, his wand, and even his dignity, it is the culmination of his mistake in underestimating the Order. He mocked them as outsiders, but it was they who proved him small. Narcissa, too, begins to see the cracks in her husband's armor. She watches as Lucius becomes quieter, more withdrawn, no longer the sharp-tongued manipulator she married. His downfall stains the Malfoy name, and the purity he so prized now tastes of ash. His alliance with Voldemort becomes more desperation than conviction, and his family begins to drift. Draco no longer looks up to him with the same reverence. In the books, this decay is slow, deliberate. Lucius is not killed, he is diminished. Perhaps the most telling difference comes in Deathly Hallows, where Lucius is no longer the confident commander, but a broken man. His earlier laughter at the Order has vanished. His silence is not just fear, it is regret. In the books, this transformation is more vivid, more personal. Rowling shows us that the aristocrat who mocked the Order as rubbish from the old world is now begging for his son's life, his pride in tatters. It is justice, but not of the kind that films can easily convey. It is worth remembering how much Lucius believed in the inevitability of his world. He did not just support Voldemort for power, he saw it as the natural order of things, the strong rule, the pure dominate. The Order was to him an insult to this vision. He could not comprehend that loyalty, friendship, and bravery could triumph over blood and status. That is why his downfall is so satisfying in the books. It is not merely defeat, it is correction. When we read Lucius laughing at the mention of Remus Lupin, a werewolf and member of the Order, we understand it is not humour, but hatred. "They'll take in anyone these days," he had sneered, knowing full well what it meant to mock a man for his affliction. It is cruelty disguised as wit, prejudice cloaked in class. The films avoid these moments, but they define him in the novels. Lucius was not just a Death Eater, he was the voice of tradition, of the old pure-blood elite trying to claw back a world that was leaving them behind. He did not rage, he dismissed. His insults cut deeper than curses because they came from a place of ancient confidence. But that confidence turned brittle when challenged. The Order, for all its chaos, had something Lucius never understood: conviction. That was why they won. That was why he fell. In the end, Lucius's silence in the films makes him a ghost of the man in the books, a character who is present but not complete. His scorn, his pride, his downfall, all of it is diminished. Without his mocking words, we lose the full measure of his arrogance, and without that arrogance, we lose the poetry of his fall. Rowling gave us a villain who believed he was a king. The films gave us a man who acted like a soldier. But in truth, Lucius Malfoy was a crumbling monument to a world that was already gone. Number 25 hid his disappointment with Voldemort. Lucius Malfoy stood tall when the world trembled. He was once the image of nobility in the wizarding world, draped in fine robes and crowned by the influence of an ancient pure-blood lineage. In the early pages of the Harry Potter series, his pride was as polished as his walking cane, his disdain for Muggleborns sharpened like the blade hidden within it. But something shifts, quietly and powerfully, after Voldemort's return. The Lucius Malfoy we see in the later chapters of the books is a ghost of the man he once was. What happened to him was not merely fear. It was humiliation, slow erosion of identity, and the silent collapse of dignity. The films offer glimpses, but the books expose the bones of his downfall. There, his descent is more than visual, it is spiritual. At the end of Goblet of Fire, when Voldemort rises again in the graveyard, Lucius is named among the returned Death Eaters. Voldemort addresses him directly, almost mockingly, with the line, "And here we have Lucius, my slippery friend." It is a chilling moment. Voldemort knows that Lucius has lived in comfort during his master's absence, navigating the ministry with influence, wealth, and impunity. The rebuke is quiet but sharp, a warning wrapped in civility. From that moment on, Lucius is no longer in control of his fate. What he had long believed would be a triumphant return to power turns into a slow, silent punishment. Lucius had believed that his loyalty, even if dormant, would be rewarded. He imagined a resurgence of the old ways, with himself among the honored inner circle. Instead, Voldemort turns him into a tool. His wealth is not rewarded, it is seized. His home, the Grand Malfoy Manor, becomes Voldemort's base of operations. The drawing room of Malfoy Manor was high-ceilinged and large, formerly a place of luxury, the narrator tells us in Deathly Hallows. Now it is filled with terror and cold. Nagini slithers across the table where guests once dined. The Malfoys are no longer hosts, but prisoners in their own home. In the films, Lucius's fear is shown through trembling hands and pale expressions, but the internal breakdown, the rotting sense of self, is barely touched. The books, on the other hand, chronicle every crack. After the disastrous failure at the Department of Mysteries, in Order of the Phoenix, where Lucius is arrested and sent to Azkaban, he is no longer the man he once was. In the 6th book, Half-Blood Prince, Narcissa pleads with Snape to protect Draco, a mission Voldemort assigns to their only son as punishment for Lucius's failure. This is not ambition, this is vengeance. Lucius is no longer even allowed to serve. He becomes a spectator of his family's suffering. His son is marked not by privilege, but by danger. Draco, a boy of arrogance in earlier books, is reduced to a pale shadow, constantly on the edge of collapse. Lucius watches it all in silence. The man who once boasted of his power before the Minister of Magic now dares not speak in meetings. The text says it best. Lucius, whose hand had once rested lazily on Draco's shoulder, now gripped his cane with white knuckles. Even in his own home, Lucius has no command. Voldemort uses his wand, uses his space, uses his family, and never once offers gratitude. During the horrific scene in Deathly Hallows when Charity Burbage is murdered above the dining table, Lucius does not speak. He watches with fear in his eyes, unable to stop what unfolds mere inches from his face. There is no protest, there is no appeal. There is only silence and a tightening jaw. Voldemort breaks him not with torture, but with dismissal. Lucius becomes invisible. The book reveals his disintegration in glances and gestures. When Voldemort asks for a wand to borrow, he chooses Lucius's, and Lucius gives it. No, he surrenders it, like a man handing over the last piece of himself. Rowling describes him reaching for it as though every movement were an effort. His reluctance is wordless, but it roars off the page. He doesn't dare refuse, but he knows what this means. Even his wand, a symbol of personal power, is no longer his own. The Lucius Malfoy of earlier books would have fought to keep his wand. He would have argued, manipulated, protested. But this Lucius has learned the cost of speaking. His silence is not loyalty, it is survival. The character's arc is not about redemption, nor is it a fall from grace in the dramatic sense. It is a dismembering. Bit by bit, Lucius loses what once defined him. Wealth becomes a cage, pride becomes a memory, family becomes a battlefield. And yet he never openly rebels. This is what makes his arc so unsettling. He does not stand up to Voldemort. He does not try to protect Draco with action. Instead, he retreats inward, deeper into a shell of what he once was. During the final battle at Hogwarts, he does not fight for the Dark Lord. He does not stand among the Death Eaters. Instead, he and Narcissa wander the battlefield in search of their son. This too is an act of cowardice cloaked in parental love. He has nothing left to give Voldemort, not loyalty, not fear, not even pretense. The films condense this arc into a few looks and stammered sentences, but the books paint it with slow, brutal detail. Lucius becomes a study in emotional collapse. The proud aristocrat is not slain or cursed, he is drained. The Wizarding War does not kill him, it simply empties him. When Harry sees the Malfoys in the forest after the battle, they are described as broken and out of place. The war is over, the victors are celebrating, but Lucius, who once stood among kings, now stands among ghosts. The cruelty of his fate lies in the fact that Voldemort never needed to shout at him. He humiliated Lucius through absence of recognition. There was no rage, only neglect. That's why Lucius dared not voice his disappointment. The text shows that he resents Voldemort's control, that he mourns his lost influence, but he never speaks it aloud. To do so would mean death. Instead, Lucius simmers. He looked thoroughly cowed, a shadow of his former self, the narrator notes, when the Malfoys appear at the manor during the Snatcher scene. Every word is measured, every movement calculated to avoid notice. This inner fracture makes Lucius one of the most haunting figures in the series. He is not defeated in battle, nor outwitted in politics. He is simply broken by prolonged subjugation. Voldemort knew exactly how to destroy a man like Lucius, by taking everything that defined him and treating it as worthless. A man who built his identity on legacy, power, and control finds himself with none of the three. His disappointment is never named, but it is everywhere. It's in the way he no longer looks Harry in the eye. It's in the way he lets his wife speak in his place. It's in the absence of fight. The proud peacock of Chamber of Secrets is gone. In his place is a hollow figure who watches his world fall apart with silent horror. The man who once influenced laws and funded schools now waits for permission to speak. Rowling's portrayal is both subtle and devastating. She never gives Lucius a dramatic moment of rebellion. There is no fiery speech or tragic last stand. Instead, she allows him to crumble. When the war ends, he is not among those punished in Azkaban, but he is not free either. His punishment is to live in the ruins of his ambition. He walks away not with scars, but with shame. The Lucius of the books is more complex than the films allow. His arc is not just about fear, it is about failure. He fails Voldemort. He fails his family. He fails himself. But he does so quietly, almost invisibly. And in that invisibility lies his true punishment. The man who once demanded attention now hopes not to be seen. Even in the epilogue, Lucius is absent. Draco appears on the platform, older, calmer, changed, but Lucius does not. Perhaps he is alive, perhaps he is not. But either way, his story ends, not with a bang, but with a void. He faded from the world he once sought to rule, swallowed by the silence he chose over rebellion. And yet one cannot entirely hate him. There is pity in the way he clings to his son in the final chapters. There is pity in the way his hand trembles as Voldemort approaches. He is a villain, yes, but he is also a cautionary tale. Power without spine is not power at all. The books make this clear, the films suggest it. But only in the books do we truly see Lucius Malfoy not as a villain, but as a man who slowly realized he had chosen the wrong side and had no way. Number 26. Let Narcissa lie to Voldemort. Lucius Malfoy stood among the ruins of his ambition. In the final moments of the war, the proud patriarch of the Malfoy family was no longer a symbol of pure blood supremacy, but a man hollowed out by fear, shame, and desperation. The transformation of Lucius from the haughty Death Eater who once sneered at Arthur Weasley to a broken shadow of his former self was nowhere more evident than in the moment when his wife, Narcissa Malfoy, defied the Dark Lord. And he said nothing. That silence spoke volumes, and within it lay the last remnants of his resistance and the quiet scream of a man who had lost everything but his family. Lucius Malfoy's portrayal in the books is one of a slow unravelling. From his early appearances as a calculating aristocrat to the final chapters of the Deathly Hallows, Lucius experiences a tragic decline. His fear becomes palpable, his control over his household slips. His authority within the Death Eater ranks crumbles, yet the most telling moment comes not with wands drawn but in a hushed breath in the Forbidden Forest. It is there when Narcissa bends over Harry Potter and whispers a single question. Is Draco alive? That Lucius's inaction becomes his most potent statement. He watches her lie to Voldemort, declaring Harry dead. He knows she is lying, but he does not stop her, he does not speak. He simply lets it happen. This moment, while included in the films, is presented with far less nuance. Jason Isaacs' portrayal of Lucius captures the desperation well, but the complexity of his internal collapse, the silent battle between fear, love, and shame, is largely glossed over. In the book, Lucius is not merely broken, he is disarmed, literally and spiritually. Voldemort has taken his wand, his mansion has become a prison. His wife and son are pawns on a bloodstained board he no longer controls. Lucius is not a strategist anymore, he is a survivor. And survival means knowing when to say nothing. The Lucius of the early books would never have tolerated such defiance. In Chamber of Secrets, he orchestrates Ginny Weasley's possession without remorse. He walks into Flourish and Blots with swagger and venom, insulting the Weasleys and flaunting his superiority. That Lucius would have condemned any whisper of rebellion. But by the Deathly Hallows, his posture is different. He no longer dominates rooms. He pleads with Voldemort to spare Draco. When Harry is captured and brought to Malfoy Manor, Lucius doesn't revel in triumph. He begs for recognition. My lord, my son, Draco is in the cellar, if I might have your permission to fetch him. His voice is no longer proud, it is small. This erosion of character is what makes his silence during Narcissa's deception so profound. In the Deathly Hallows, when Voldemort commands Narcissa to check if Harry is dead, the narrative describes her walking to Harry, kneeling beside him, and whispering the only words that matter to her. Is Draco alive? Harry, understanding her motive, responds yes, and she rises to tell Voldemort the lie he desperately wants to hear. Lucius is there. The text reads, Lucius, whose face was gaunt and grey, stared at his wife as though she had turned into a stranger. Yet he says nothing, not a word. That silence is a choice. Lucius knew the cost of crossing Voldemort. He had seen the Dark Lord's punishments. He had endured them himself. And yet in that moment, he does not expose Narcissa. He does not even flinch to betray her. It is not an act of rebellion in the traditional sense. He is not siding with Harry Potter, nor is he suddenly reformed. It is, instead, a tragic capitulation to love, not for the cause, not for right or wrong, but for the fragile threads that still connect him to Narcissa and Draco. Voldemort may be a tyrant, but Lucius is still a father, and this moment is the last choice he makes as one. In the film adaptation, the emotional weight is there, but the moral texture is flattened. Narcissa's lie is quick. Lucius is present, but more confused than contemplative. The camera does not linger on him with the same intensity the book affords. His silence is not framed as defiance. It is a background reaction. We lose the internal storm, the weight of a man watching his wife commit treason against a dark lord who once held their loyalty like a chain. The movie gives us fear, the book gives us fear, resignation, and a deeply human sadness. Lucius Malfoy's silence marks the final step in his collapse. He is no longer an actor on the grand stage of war. He is not on either side. He is simply a man who wants it to end. When the final battle erupts at Hogwarts, the Malfoys are not seen rallying to Voldemort's side. They are not shouting curses or taking prisoners. They are searching for Draco, that is all. In the midst of a war that has consumed their wealth, reputation, and standing, all they want is to be together and safe. This desire, so mundane and so deeply human, is the ultimate rejection of everything Voldemort promised. For a character who began as a symbol of elitism, Lucius's fall is steep. He does not die in battle. He does not sacrifice himself nobly. He does not deliver a redemptive speech. His redemption, if one can call it that, is found in his lack of action, in his failure to enforce the rules of his master, in his surrender to the bond between a mother and son. It is a quiet rebellion, but rebellion nonetheless. And it comes not from courage, but exhaustion. There is no clearer proof of this than Lucius's behavior during the final confrontation at Hogwarts. When Voldemort calls for Harry's corpse to be displayed, the Malfoys do not cheer. When the tide turns against the Death Eaters, they do not fight to the last breath. The book says the Malfoys had slipped away into the crowd, and Harry saw Draco, flanked by his parents, disappearing into the night. They do not wait for a verdict. They do not ask for forgiveness. They simply leave. Their loyalty has ended not with betrayal, but with detachment. Lucius's silence is part of a larger arc in which he is steadily stripped of everything that once defined him. His house becomes a prison, his son a bargaining chip, his wand taken by Voldemort himself. Even his appearance deteriorates. By the end, he is described as pale, trembling, hollow-eyed, a man unmade. And in that unmaking, Rowling crafts a powerful lesson, that evil corrodes not only its victims but its adherents. Lucius's fall is not dramatic, it is slow, humiliating, and painfully human. The tragedy of Lucius Malfoy is that he never believed in Voldemort as much as he believed in the idea of power. He aligned himself with the Death Eaters because it offered prestige and control. He flaunted his wealth and influence as armor. But when Voldemort returned, Lucius discovered that power without autonomy is a curse. He was reduced from kingmaker to servant, and the cost of that power was his soul. It is Narcissa who ultimately makes the brave choice, but Lucius, in his silence, allows it. He does not stop her. He does not warn Voldemort. This is not heroism. It is not redemption in the traditional sense, but it is an admission that love, even when buried under layers of prejudice and ambition, still remains. And in this love, there is a trace of something unspoken, a regret perhaps, or just a desire to end the pain. In many ways, Lucius's silence is more powerful than a speech. It is a silence forged from years of fear, failure, and finally, surrender. It is the silence of a man who has nothing left to say and no one left to impress. He does not need to win anymore, he only needs to survive. And sometimes survival means letting someone else break the rules. The complexity of Lucius's character is one of Rowling's subtler achievements. In a story filled with grand gestures and dramatic confrontations, his final act is a whisper. But that whisper echoes. It shows us that not all resistance comes with a wand raised. Sometimes it comes with a look, a breath, or a choice not to speak. Lucius Malfoy is not a hero. He does not deserve praise. But in this moment he becomes something else, a reminder that even the most corrupted soul can still feel love, that even the weakest man can choose not to obey, and that even silence can be a form of rebellion.